God bless Arabs, God bless Palestinians. What we are hearing here is a justification of neoliberal terrorism by Daniel Pipes. He's wonderfully soft-spoken, but when you actually listen to the logic of what he's saying, his only answer is violence. A problem comes up, violence. Another problem comes up, violence. And I've got one thing to say to you, Daniel Pipes. You've tried that route and you've failed. Iraq has been a disaster. Not only has it been morally wrong, which is something we were saying, but tactically, your policy hasn't worked. You have not stopped the threat of terrorism. You've made it worse. You have not made Americans safer. You've made them more insecure. In fact, the only people who benefited are the elite of neoliberals who are continuing to profit. Everybody else, this has been a disaster for.
Two quick rejoinders. One is that I'm not calling for violence, I'm calling for victory. And, excuse me, there's a slight difference. We, the West, gained a victory over the Soviet Union in 1989, 1991. I don't remember a great battle taking place during those years of great military engagement. No, we had a victory. I'm talking about victory, not about violence. Secondly, I have great differences with the U.S. government over Iraq. I was in favor of going to Iraq and getting rid of Saddam Hussein and turning over the keys to the Iraqis and saying, it's your country. You're responsible. You're adults. We wish you well. Here's some money. We'll leave some soldiers in the desert. So don't ascribe U.S. policy to me. Learn a little bit about me before you ascribe positions to me, Ms. Yaqub. Listen to what I say. Ask me questions. But don't simply assume you know what my positions are.
I want to bring in, we've got about 10 or 12 minutes left. That gentleman there, and then the lady who's got cramp in her arm. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'd like to thank you for putting this conference on, but yet again to share the concern expressed by others here today about this being a Saturday. I'm from the Jewish community. I've got no problem being here today, but I know a number of people have got, and the feeling of dispossession, the feeling of exclusion should not be underestimated. I know you've worked hard to get in the meeting organised for tonight, but I hope we can learn from this for the future. Points I wanted to make very briefly are, do we think that polemical debate like this is the answer to the questions for London? It's been absolutely great theatre this morning, but I would question whether or not the four speakers are the total view of London and how we actually start to answer some of the real questions asked around education, asked around social exclusion, the rise of fascist movements in East London and so on, about how that fits in to one London. And just 2 points at the end. One is, Salma, many of us were waiting for you to hear the I word, Israel, and your wish to include the Jewish community in who you want to live with. And Daniel, can we really actually get rid of this myth, which has existed, I think, for nearly 60, 70 years, that Hitler won a majority. He did not. Progressive forces on the left split themselves, and that's why Hitler gained power, not because he used the ballot box. Thank you very much indeed.
You'll be glad to know that this is not a unique conference. We hold a conference with not quite this attendance every year where we discuss all the range of policies, all my senior staff here to answer questions of anybody who turns up. We have a specific conference, almost as well attended as this, discussing the problems of exclusion and the way that the education system fails the black child. And we have a conference almost as big as this in which women turn up and discuss all the problems that they face in. And I have to say, when you look at the range of what we do, I doubt if there's anywhere else in Britain, perhaps even in Europe, where an administration so opens itself up to public participation without any vetting, any organising of questions. Anyone just walks through that door and takes part. So I think actually we have nothing to learn.
I don't believe I said that Hitler won a majority of the vote. I said he achieved office through the ballot box, which he did. He had a plurality. Listen to what I say. Don't ascribe to me words I didn't say.
Okay, I want to bring in this lady here. You have been terribly patient.
Yes, hi. I wanted to make 2 points. The first point was both Daniel Pipes and Douglas Murray have invoked the liberal, moderate Muslim woman. So I thought, as a liberal, moderate Muslim woman, I might speak for myself if that's all right. Firstly, mean, obviously, it's very kind of him to invoke our rights to justify his arguments. But of course, putting Saudi Arabia down as his list of countries that should be supported rather contradicts his own point of view. In relation to Douglas Murray, what I'd like to say is that I'm glad you've condemned the Saudi regime as being a regime that actually needs to be challenged. From the point of view of moderate liberal Muslims, of course, they're a much bigger threat than all the people you've identified as being the threat in London. It's these sort of totalitarian regimes, the totalitarian regimes in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and in Syria. These are the real threats to moderate Muslim opinion. But the main point that I wanted to make, and by the way, all these people like Hersed, Ali, Irshad Manji, they do not represent moderate liberal Muslim movement. And just because they're invoked by the American Enterprise Institute and given jobs in America does not make them more representative. But the main point I wanted to make is it's the part of the research that I'm talking about this afternoon about anti-Semitism as a prototype. Everything that Daniel Pipes has said about a civilizational threat was said about Jews in the late 19th century as being linked with anarchist bombings, as being a threat to Bolshevism. Everything that you've said about the threat of Muslims in London was said about Jews in the East End. They're too committed to the Talmud. They're too committed to an unreformed text. Their text is violent. SHJs in the late 19th century said, in words that could echo Daniel Pipes, that Jews were unfit to fit in with liberal democratic institutions. So what I'd like to say to both of you and to the Mayor of London is that London has had this experience before. These ideas could have been verbatim said about the Jewish community in the late 19th century. And what we need to do is to challenge these racist tropes that recur historically.
I can't be sure whether I misspoke or whether you misheard me, but let me read you word by word what I have in my notes. I suggested we can achieve a moderate form of Islam not by get-along multiculturalism, but by standing firm with our civilized allies around the globe, and especially with liberal voices in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with Iranian dissidents, and with reformers in Afghanistan. Okay? I did not endorse this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I endorsed the dissidents within it, the liberals within it. Secondly, you've misunderstood, or I haven't explained myself adequately on my position. I have no problem with Muslims. I have an enormous problem with Islamists. I reject this calumny that I'm against Islam. I endorse and embrace the statement that I despise, fear, work hard against radical Islam. Now, there is a discussion to be held about what exactly radical Islam is, what its boundaries are. These are important and interesting debates. But as a general ideal type, I think there's not much doubt that I'm talking about those Muslims who aspire to impose Islamic law on me and on everyone in this room, and indeed globally. I reject that. And a lot of Muslims join me in rejecting that.
Just want to bring Douglas Murray. We've only got a few minutes left, and then we'll have closing arguments, and we'll be glad to know lunch. But there will be plenty of time to make a lot of these points.
I'll give a short answer to a very long question. I think it's worth mentioning this. There's a lot of talk at the moment of the Muslims and the new Jews. This is so wildly incorrect. The Jews are still the Jews. The Jews are still the new Jews. They still suffer in the same way they always have. And to make that comparison that you've just made would presuppose that at some point in the 19th century or earlier this century there were Jews committing mass murder in this city and other cities. It would presuppose that you would find it extremely hard to find a single rabbi who would condemn those things unequivocally. The comparison does not work. I'm sorry, it breaks down.
My question's for Mr. Pipes, and I think you'll take it from a dialogue which I've been having with my father-in-law. So I would like to explain to my father-in-law. He is not somebody who talked about fighting for liberty. He was on the 6th of June 1944. He landed on the beaches of Normandy. And I've learned a huge amount from him. One is when you sent to us a request for this debate, you specifically asked that we should exclude ad hominem attacks, which we wanted, immediately agreed to. I'm afraid it was not followed by Mr. Murray, but we agreed to it. Why are we against ad hominem attacks? Because the most typical form of distortion is to take one single fact out of a million facts and say that is the most important thing and organise it around that. Hitler was a vegetarian. He's obviously a kind man. It's a fact. He was a vegetarian. Right. Now,
briefly, if you would.
Yes, the issue is here. If you go and kill hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, do you not think that people will fight back? In the Blitz in Britain, anti-German things of a racial and national character were said, which considered objectively were shameful. They were taken out of that situation. In here, you will find in every civilization people who say disgraceful and extremist things. But do you not think that what breeds terrorism is killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq? And do you believe that there is any country in the world in which if you go and kill tens of thousands and you invade them and you bomb them, they will not fight back?
Okay.
Do you know of a country like that?
Very clear. I'm going to let both protagonists answer in their closing arguments. Sir Martin Gilbert, are you here? Final thoughts. Microphone here to Sir Martin Gilbert.
As a Londoner whose son was on his way to King's Cross on 7/7, I'd like to ask Councillor Yaqub, who spoke of 7/7 as a reprisal event, who the reprisals were against.
Okay. I'd call on Daniel Pipes first of all, if you'd like to have a couple of minutes to conclude this session.
First, on the topic of Iraq, I reiterate that I have not endorsed the U.S. government's position there. I was in favor of taking out Saddam Hussein and leaving. So I am not going to. I don't think it's incumbent upon me to justify policies I disagree with. More broadly, I'd like to thank again the mayor for hosting us all, and myself in particular. I think this sort of a discussion is useful. We do air our differences. I think we did so in a civilized manner. I use that word once again. I think by engaging with each other this way, we forward the process. So thank you.
Douglas Murray raised the very potent image of the bomber moving to stand beside a mother and child in order to kill. But that does not define Islam, or even all the narrower group of Islamists, any more than David Copeland, as he planted his 3 bombs in London to kill blacks and Asians, and eventually succeeding with lesbians and gay men, characterised Englishness or Christianity. And when David Copeland took life with his bombs, nobody asks the Archbishop of Canterbury to denounce it. Nobody went into a great panic about what does this say about us. We recognised we were dealing with a small and fanatical minority. And when Douglas made the recent point he made about the difference between Jews who came here 130 years ago and Muslims who come more recently. You're right, tremendous differences, but both of them received the same welcome from some of our gutter press. In 1905, that great wave of Jewish refugees were greeted by a headline in the Daily Mail saying Jews are bringing disease and crime to Britain. Exactly the same thing they now say about asylum seekers and Muslims. The truth is our strength, the strength of this city, has been immeasurably increased by the contribution that those Jewish immigrants made, and now the Muslim community makes. Also, Douglas, and it didn't really get taken up by anyone, says I had previous form. I went and invited 2 members of the IRA Army Council to come to London to discuss the situation at a time when London was being bombed. Well, you go to the people that are fighting. Because if you want to bring peace